Ryan Clark didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. When a guy like Clark speaks, it's not just noise, it's a moment. He's one of those former players who earned the right to talk because he lived it. He's seen the politics, the bias, the unspoken truths that get whispered in locker rooms but never make it to the headlines. And on this day, he had one message. Enough with the lazy Shedeur Sanders narratives. For weeks, maybe months, the chatter around Shedeur had been exactly what you'd expect from a league that still struggles to separate substance from style. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. The conversations were never just about his reads, his mechanics, or his performance in 2-minute drills. No, those conversations always had an asterisk. He's only in the league because of Deion. He's all flash, no grit. Let's see what happens when he gets hit a few times. And Ryan Clark had heard enough. Because here's the thing, Clark's been around. He knows the difference between hype and hardware. And when he broke it down, he didn't talk about Shedeur's chain, his shades, or his viral Instagram clips. He talked about the tape, the actual football, the way Shedeur manipulates safeties with his eyes, the way he sees the blitz before it happens and adjusts his protection without panic, the way he's not just making throws, he's dictating the defense. Swagger is cool, Clark said. Swagger sells. But swagger without substance? That dies fast in this league. Shedeur's different, he's got both, and one doesn't exist without the other. But here's the real gut punch in Clark's breakdown. He didn't stop at praising Shedeur's skills. He called out the uncomfortable truth about the way certain quarterbacks are judged. When a young white quarterback comes in confident, he's poised beyond his years. When a young black quarterback walks in with the same energy, suddenly it's cocky or needs to be humbled. Clark wasn't dancing around it. He was naming it for what it is. And it's not just about race. It's about comfort zones. The league has a long history of wanting their quarterbacks to fit a mold. Quiet, deferential, grateful just to be here. Shedeur? He doesn't play that role. He's respectful, sure, but he's not here to kiss the ring. He's here to compete. And that, to some people, is unsettling. This is where the Dillon Gabriel comparison became a talking point. See, Gabriel's got a fine college resume. He's accurate, has some mobility, and plays with heart. But for whatever reason, the conversations around Gabriel were always rooted in patience and potential. He just needs time in the system. Give him more reps. He's still adjusting to NFL speed. When it came to Shedeur, that grace period never existed. From day one, he was being measured against the highest bar possible, not because his play warranted immediate skepticism, but because his very presence was seen as something to test. Clark's point was simple. If you put the tapes side by side, the decision-making gap between Shedeur and Gabriel isn't close. And yet, somehow, Gabriel's development was treated like a nurturing project, while Shedeur's was treated like an interrogation. And that's what Clark wanted people to get. Shedeur has already been QB1 in every way that matters. Not just on paper, not just in the depth chart that finally reflects reality, but in the way his teammates look at him in the huddle, in the way his offensive line responds when he calls out a blitz pickup, in the way he doesn't have to beg for respect. He commands it by doing the work. That work isn't glamorous. It's not the kind of thing you see on social media. It's 5 a.m. film study before anyone else is in the building. It's grinding through protections with his center until they can communicate with a glance. It's breaking down defensive tendencies so deeply that by Sunday, the game feels slower than Wednesday's practice. Clark also touched on something that most fans overlook: mental toughness. Shedeur has been under a microscope since high school. Every game at Jackson State, every moment at Colorado, came with critics waiting for him to stumble so they could point and say, "See? Overhyped." Most young quarterbacks don't have to navigate that kind of noise before they've even played a down in the NFL. But here's where Shedeur separates himself. He doesn't just block it out. He uses it. Those backhanded compliments, that draft day slide, the talking heads questioning whether he can do it against real defenses, all of that becomes fuel. You can see it in the way he plays. There's a quiet edge, a refusal to let anyone else write his story. The irony, Clark pointed out, is that Shedeur's leadership style isn't loud at all. He's not a rah-rah guy who's screaming in people's faces for the cameras. He's controlled, intentional. When he does speak, it lands, and that's why his teammates buy in. Quarterbacks like that don't need to demand loyalty. It comes naturally. And then there's the IQ. It's easy to throw around football IQ as a buzzword, but when Clark broke it down, he went into specifics. Shedeur's pre-snap reads are already veteran level. He's not just scanning for open receivers. He's identifying leverage, anticipating rotations, and setting traps for defenders. That's chess, not checkers. You can't fake that. You can't coach it into someone who doesn't have the discipline to study. And it's the kind of thing that makes coaches trust you with a full playbook earlier than expected. Of course, the conversation wouldn't be complete without addressing the elephant in the room, Deion Sanders. There's no denying the advantage of having a Hall of Fame cornerback, media icon, and football mind as your father. But Clark made it clear. Having Deion in your corner doesn't make you a starting NFL quarterback. If anything, it raises the stakes. Because every mistake becomes an indictment not just of you, but of the family name. And Shedeur, he hasn't just lived with that weight. He's thrived under it. So, when the Browns finally handed Shedeur the QB1 spot, Clark's reaction wasn't surprise. It was inevitability. This wasn't about injuries to other quarterbacks. It wasn't about giving the kid a shot. It was about the team catching up to what anyone paying attention already knew. The truth is, Shedeur had been QB1 long before the depth chart said so. Long before the media decided to reframe the narrative. The difference now is that the rest of the world is being forced to see it. And if you believe Ryan Clark, that's just the beginning. Because for all the talk about swagger, brand deals, and media buzz, the most dangerous thing about Shedeur Sanders isn't any of that. It's the fact that underneath all of it, there's a quarterback who's still getting better, and who's already ahead of the curve. It started like any other segment. Bright lights, a round table of former players, and the usual debate over which quarterback had the edge going into the season. But the second Shedeur Sanders' name got lumped into a lazy comparison with Dillon Gabriel, Ryan Clark leaned forward, locked eyes with the camera, and let out a slow, deliberate sigh. "See, this right here," he said, "is why people stay confused about what makes a quarterback." The panel went quiet. Clark didn't raise his voice, but the conviction in his tone hit harder than a blindside sack. He wasn't here to play the hot take game. He was here to set the record straight. You keep putting Shedeur in the same sentence as guys who might be ready. I'm telling you, he's been QB1 all along. You're just late to the party. And just like that, the temperature in the room changed. This wasn't about highlight reels or flashy chains. It wasn't about who could throw the tightest spiral in shorts at a summer camp. Clark broke it down to the bones. Leadership, decision-making, composure. He talked about the way Shedeur can read a defense like he's flipping through a magazine. How he doesn't just call plays. He controls the huddle. You know what the difference is? Clark leaned in again. Respect. Shedeur doesn't ask for it. He doesn't need to. Players give it to him because they feel in the way he works, the way he prepares, the way he stares down a blitz and doesn't flinch. The other panelists shifted in their seats. Some nodded, some hesitated. Because here's the thing. Shedeur's rise has made a lot of people uncomfortable. From the moment he walked into the league, the story around him wasn't about what he could do, but about who he was. Deion Sanders' son, the famous dad, the flashy image, the kid with the custom suits, and the camera crew. And yeah, Shedeur's aware of that. He knows every mistake will be magnified, and every success will be framed as hype. But here's the part the critics keep missing. None of that matters when the ball is snapped. Clark knew it. His former player instincts could spot the real thing. And Shedeur? He's got the real thing in spades. The Browns might have tried to bury him on the depth chart. They might have written him off as a long-term development project. But every rep he's gotten, every chance, he's forced people to look twice. That perfect 15-4-15 practice? That wasn't a fluke. That was a warning shot. Gabriel's mechanics might look clean on paper, but the game isn't played on paper. It's played in the chaos, when the pocket collapses, when a play breaks down, when you've got 280 pounds of pass rush in your face, and the entire stadium is screaming. And that's where Shedeur shines. Pressure doesn't change him, Clark said. It sharpens him. He's not the loudest voice in the room. He doesn't need to be. He's the voice that makes everyone else believe they can win. That's the intangible Clark kept hammering. The thing you can't measure in stats or combined drills. And here's the kicker. Clark wasn't just defending Shedeur from the Gabriel comparison. He was calling out the system. The way young, confident black quarterbacks get dissected differently. The way their confidence gets called cocky, while others get labeled fiery competitors. Shedeur's not here to fit your mold, Clark said. He's here to win football games. And if you can't see the difference, that's on you. It wasn't just sports talk anymore. It was a challenge to the media, to the scouts, to the fans who still think swagger means a lack of substance. Clark wrapped it up with a smirk, leaning back in his chair. You'll see, he said. He's been QB1. You're just finally noticing. And that's the thing. Shedeur doesn't need to shout to make his point. He doesn't need to convince you. He just needs the ball, the moment, and the chance. Because when the lights are brightest and the noise is loudest, that's when he reminds you why some people are built for it. Some people are made to play quarterback, and some people are made to change what it means. When Ryan Clark left that studio, his phone lit up, not with congratulations or agreement, at least not at first, but with a flurry of texts from current players, former teammates, and even a few coaches. About time someone said it. That kid's a real deal. You might have just started a fire. Because here's what the panel didn't show. Clark's words didn't just offend Shedeur Sanders. They cracked open a conversation that had been quietly bubbling under the surface for months. Inside the Browns facility, there had always been two camps. On one side were the old-school thinkers, the ones who believed Shedeur was all image and no grind, a product of famous name rather than the work required to survive in the NFL. On the other side, the people who'd actually watched him in practice. They knew the truth. They'd seen the way he stayed after reps to work with receivers, the way he dissected film like a surgeon, the way he took third-string offensive linemen out to dinner just to build chemistry. Ryan Clark's segment didn't create Shedeur's respect. It revealed it. The very next day in camp, there was a different kind of energy. Not from Shedeur. He was the same as always, head down, locked in, but from the people around him. When he walked into the huddle, the chatter quieted faster. When he dropped back to pass, you could feel eyes from both sidelines watching. Even some defensive vets who prided themselves on giving rookie quarterbacks hell seemed to step back just a fraction, not out of fear, but respect. The Gabriel comparison? It evaporated, not because Gabriel stopped trying, but because the contrast was too sharp now. Shedeur's poise in drills wasn't just better. It was unshakable. He had this way of moving through progression that didn't look rushed, but somehow still beat the blitz. The ball didn't just get there. It arrived exactly where the receiver's hands would be in stride. Ryan Clark had given the public the words for what his teammates had already been feeling. But here's where the story deepens. Clark's defense didn't just change the conversation in Cleveland. It hit the national stage. Other analysts started reevaluating their takes. Suddenly, Shedeur might not be ready became Shedeur's upside is scary. And once that switch flips in the media, it's almost impossible to turn it back. Inside the Sanders camp, they didn't celebrate. They strategized. Dillon, Coach Prime, knew exactly what this moment was. Public sentiment is a currency in the NFL, especially when you're a quarterback. When the world starts talking about you as QB1, you don't waste time. You lean into it. And Shedeur, he didn't need to be told. He started meeting with his receivers an hour earlier before practice. He started micromanaging the details, timing footwork, sight reads, like he was already the starter. It wasn't about proving Ryan Clark right. It was about making sure no one could ever say his defense was premature. This is where another layer kicks in, the business side. Every time Shedeur's name trended after that segment, jersey sales spiked. His own merchandise lines, which he controlled thanks to that groundbreaking contract clause, saw a surge. But here's the important part. He didn't let the business overshadow the work. If anything, he doubled down on the grind. knowing the only thing more dangerous than hype is living up to it. And in the locker room, that balance mattered. NFL players can sniff out a fraud in seconds. If you're all marketing and no meat, they'll let you know on the field and in the press. But when the guy with the flashy image also happens to be the one who studies the most, stays the latest, and makes everyone else's job easier, that's when the team starts to rally. By week 2 of the preseason, something had shifted in the Browns' QB room. The hierarchy wasn't official on paper, but everyone could feel it. Shedeur's reps weren't just evaluations anymore. They were rehearsals. Coaches were starting to scheme plays that matched his skill set. The play-action passes had more vertical threats. The rollouts looked designed for his mobility and vision. Even the protection packages were tweaked to give him the clean pocket he thrives in. The whispers turned into conversations. Are we really going to start the season without him under center? What's the point of waiting? But the most telling moment came from the defensive side of the ball. Myles Garrett, face of the franchise, no-nonsense leader, was spotted talking to Shedeur after scrimmage. Cameras caught it, but no one could hear what was said. Later, a source in the locker room claimed Garrett told him, "If you start, we'll keep you standing." That's as much of an endorsement as you'll ever get from a defensive captain. The Dillon Gabriel comparison? Long gone. Now, the debate wasn't if Shedeur would start, but when. Ryan Clark's point had landed exactly where it needed to. The public started catching up to what the Browns players already knew. That QB1 isn't just a name on a depth chart. It's an energy, a presence, a command that can't be faked. And Shedeur Sanders? He'd been QB1 from the moment he walked in the door. The rest of the world was just catching on. The week before the Panthers game didn't feel like a normal preseason lead-up. It felt like the Browns were living inside a slow-burn sports documentary. You could sense the stakes without anyone saying them out loud. Shedeur wasn't just getting more reps. He was quietly being given ownership of the offense. The little details gave it away. Quarterbacks coach Alex Van Pelt started slipping into his meetings earlier, drawing up slight adjustments to route concepts with Shedeur in mind. They were subtle things, altering motion timings, tweaking the split on a slot receiver to set up a quick read, but they were his adjustments, not the boilerplate install. Even the offensive line meetings started changing. Guards and tackles were spending more time reviewing how to keep interior lanes clean. So Shedeur could step up in the pocket without having to slide left into a collapsing edge. Those tweaks don't happen unless the coaches are envisioning you as the guy who needs those lanes. And here's the thing he noticed. Shedeur has that Deion Sanders quality of being hyper-aware of the room without letting it make him paranoid. He caught the shifts, the added attention, but didn't flaunt it. In fact, he doubled down on being unselfish. Anytime a backup wideout caught a ball in drills, he made sure to give that guy the moment, point clap, let everyone know they saw it. That's leadership you can't fake. Meanwhile, the Panthers game film was on his iPad every free second. This wasn't about proving he could play NFL ball. That ship had sailed in camp. It was about anticipating every disguise Carolina's defense might throw at him. When they showed a 5-man front in a preseason clip from Week 1, he stopped the video, rewound it, and told the coaches exactly where the free rusher would come from based on the safety rotation. You don't teach that at the rookie symposium. That's instincts plus homework. Inside the building, this attention to detail started turning assistants into advocates. Trainers who'd worked with him during his minor arm soreness were vouching for his work ethic in meetings. Equipment guys were talking about how he'd be the last one to leave after night practices, still throwing to whoever stuck around. In a franchise where the quarterback spot had been a revolving door for decades, Shedeur was giving them something they hadn't felt in a long time: stability. And then came the Panthers' shadow. Carolina's defense wasn't elite on paper, but in preseason, they had a nasty habit of coming after young quarterbacks. Their blitz percentage in exhibition games was high, almost comically so for August. It was a test, and everyone knew it. Shedeur leaned into that challenge. Instead of dialing back to protect his numbers, he actually asked the Browns' defense to mimic Carolina's pressure looks during practice. Myles Garrett and the unit obliged, throwing exotic fronts and delayed blitzes at him in scrimmages just to see if they could rattle him. They couldn't. In fact, there was one rep where Garrett came free off the edge, fully expecting a sack, and Shedeur somehow sidestepped him, reset, and threw a dart 20 yards downfield to a crossing receiver. Garrett didn't even jog back to the huddle. He just laughed and shook his head. That clip never made it to social media. But inside the locker room, it became part of the Shedeur lore. By Thursday, the atmosphere in Berea had shifted. Normally, preseason week 2 is about evaluating roster depth. This one felt like a dress rehearsal for a changing of the guard. The media might not have been told outright, but players knew. If Shedeur handled Carolina the way he'd been handling practice, the depth chart would look different by Monday. This is where the psychology came into play. Every player chasing a starting job has to balance swagger with patience. Too much swagger and you're cocky. Too much patience and you look passive. Shedeur was walking the line like a tightrope artist. He kept his interviews short, refused to bite on questions comparing him to Dillon Gabriel, and redirected praise toward his teammates. But in closed-door meetings, when the coaches asked who was ready to take command, he didn't hesitate. He said, "I am," not "I think I am," not "I hope to be," just "I am." Meanwhile, Gabriel wasn't taking it well. His reps were fewer, his timing was off, and he'd started pressing. That's the worst place to be as a quarterback, when you feel like you have to make a highlight throw on every snap to keep pace. Shedeur didn't need to force anything, which only made the contrast sharper. And then, an unexpected twist. Friday's walkthrough was supposed to be light, mostly mental reps, but Shedeur treated it like it was Sunday. Every handoff was crisp, every check of the line was sharp, and even on plays designed to go half speed, he delivered the ball on time like it was live. Coaches eat that stuff up. It's the kind of thing they point to in film sessions as setting the tone. That night, word leaked, not through an official announcement, but through whispers, that Shedeur would get the opening series against Carolina's first-team defense. No safe bubble screens, no scripted, just don't turn it over game plan. Real football. In the players' hotel, guys were placing their own quiet bets on how it would go. Some thought he'd play it safe. Others expected him to take a deep shot on the first play, just to announce himself. But everyone agreed on one thing. This wasn't just another preseason rep. This was the moment. Saturday morning. He walked into the facility with headphones on, hood up, no entourage. His playlist? Nobody knows. But you could tell by the way he moved that it wasn't hype music. It was something deliberate. Something that slowed the game down in his head before it even began. And when he stepped onto the field for warm-ups, the energy from the Browns sideline told you everything you needed to know. The linemen were joking with him. Receivers were loosening up with more bounce. Even the defense, standing on the opposite side, seemed to be watching out of the corner of their eye. The story Ryan Clark had been telling on television, that this was QB1 in waiting, was about to get its proof. And here's the kicker. Shedeur wasn't walking out there to take the job. In his mind, he already had it. This was just the public reveal.